Is it on? Now I'm on. No, is it? You hear me? Okay, thank you. Those students who are part of Dr. Heidi Hanrahan's class are invited to sign this sheet so that Dr. Hanrahan will know that you were actually here, okay? So anyway, thank you. There's a form on the bottom. So as I was saying, just welcome everyone to the President's Lecture Series. This is the last of our fall season, and this is a very special one. This lecture is part of the Year of Civility, a collaboration between Shepherd University and the Stubblefield Institute, focusing on civil discussion while addressing complex issues. Tonight, we are thrilled to hear from the distinguished Scott Widmeyer and to enjoy the company of Drs. Bill and Bonnie Stubblefield, who are right with us. They established the Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications right here on our campus, and this has given us so many wonderful opportunities that we would not have had without their support. So Bill, Bonnie, I always want to say thank you very much. Now, Scott has a very, very impressive resume, and so Scott, when I'm finished, you'll have about 15 minutes left. But I'm going to read it all. Okay. Scott has a long-standing record in providing strategic counsel to scores of decision makers, from presidents to governors to chief executive officers to union leaders. From working as a newspaper reporter in the 1970s to running major media operations for national campaigns, Widmeyer knows how to get results for his clients. His track record of success in education, healthcare, politics, technology, trade, and other major policy areas illustrate his impact as a change agent. These are on topics that matter most to Americans. Scott founded Widmeyer Communications in 1988, building on a career in newspaper reporting and serving in major communications positions for 5 highly respected leaders, including President Jimmy Carter, Vice President Walter Mondale, U.S. Senator Jay Rockefeller, the late Congresswoman Geraldine Ferrara, and the late American Federation of Teachers President Albert Shanker. In 2013, Widmeyer's firm was acquired by Finn Partners, a full-service global communications agency regarded as one of the fastest growing in the world. Scott is active in many civic and philanthropic causes from his base in New York City and in Washington, D.C. Currently, Widmeyer co-chairs the Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications Board and chairs George Washington University's National Council for the School of Media and Public Affairs. In addition, he is on the boards of Country Roads Angel Network, the Leadership Academy, the Catskill Mountain Foundation, the WVU College of Creative Arts and the Media, and St. Gregory's Episcopal Church. From 2017 through 2020, Scott hosted a weekly public affairs radio show produced by Nantucket NPR and streamed on multiple media channels. His guests range from governors, members of Congress, top media, authors, and union leaders. It was very popular. Scott is a graduate of WVU, where he has established 2 scholarship funds to benefit African American and first-generation West Virginians seeking a degree in journalism. To date, more than 50 students have benefited from these scholarships, and in 2005, Widmeyer and his firm established the Widmeyer Communications Professorship in Public Relations, the first of its kind in the nation. Widmeyer has served as a visiting professor at numerous distinguished institutions. In 2003, he received WVU's most prestigious award in journalism, the P.I. Reed Achievement Award. Widmeyer was inducted into the WVU Academy of Distinguished Alumni in 2009, and his firm received the 2012 Diversity Distinction in PR Awards from the Council of PR Firms. In 2007, Scott was named a David Rockefeller Fellow, a highly coveted one-year program of the New York City Partnership. Scott also chaired the capital campaign for West Virginia University's College of Media. In 2005, then West Virginia Governor Bob Wise bestowed upon Widmeyer the Distinguished West Virginian Award, the highest honor provided by the chief executive of the state. And in 2010, he was named to the PR News Hall of Fame. In May 2023, Widmeyer received an honorary doctorate degree from West Virginia University, where he delivered the 2023 commencement address to the graduates of the WVU College of Media. Also noteworthy in 2023, he was recognized as one of the McMurrin Society honorees right here at Shepherd University. And I would just share with all of you, Scott has helped me tremendously ever since I've been here as president, always, and for free, by the way, all free. Very generous with his time and advice. We are really looking forward to hearing Scott's ideas on where we go from here in today's political climate, and I hope all of you will join us after the lecture for a reception in the lobby of the Byrd Center. Please join me in welcoming Scott Widmeyer. Thank you.
Mary, thank you very, very much for that extremely kind introduction. Can everybody hear okay? Good evening, everyone. Again, Mary, thank you for the introduction. It's really great to be here this evening, and more than anything, it's really good to come home, because this is home. When President Hendricks and Cindy reached out to me 6 months ago to invite me to be part of the President's Lecture Series and the university's Year of Civility program, I said, yes, of course. It's so important. The work taking place here on the Shepherd campus and in the community around here, civility and civil discourse is exemplary. And Shepherd ranks very high, very, very high among its peers in higher education when it comes to colleges and universities tackling this very complicated topic. There are not many colleges and universities around the country doing this. And I'll tell you a few that are, though, because Shepherd is in a special league. The expanse of the civil discourse program being offered by Shepherd is unmatched by most peer institutions around the United States. You are an exception, and you are in a league with some outstanding schools. Arizona State University has an incredible program and an institute called the National Institute for Civil Discourse. There are similar programs like what's going on here at Shepherd, at Vanderbilt, MIT, Hopkins, Princeton, but again, you are in a very special category. And the efforts underway on this campus and in these communities hopefully can help to counter what we are seeing unfold in America today. And I want to talk about that this evening. I want to reflect on a lot of what's been going on in our country the last year or so, the last few years. And I will reflect on that, and I'm going to show you some data, and I'm going to give you a path forward. I'm going to try to lay it out. I know a lot of people maybe came tonight because they want to cry on my shoulder or something like that. I've heard that from a few people. But this is no time for crying. This is a time for listening more and trying to come up with what our next act will be. And I don't mean our next act as a Democrat. I mean our next act as a society, our next act as citizens of this world. We have two great Americans here tonight to thank for their vision and their contributions in allowing Shepherd to stand out on the civility stage. Mary mentioned them, and I'm going to do it again. They are Bonnie and Bill Stubblefield. Without Bill and Bonnie's vision, without their support, we wouldn't be here this evening. What they have done, both with their philanthropic and their intellectual investment, is second to none. Bonnie and Bill, I thank you. I thank you deeply. And we thank you. From the bottom of our heart, I mean, we really need to recognize that, because that is what all of this is about. And we need more people like the Stubblefields to step up. I feel very fortunate to co-chair the Stubblefield Institute and be part of what I view, and I think many view, as an experiment. We are an experiment, and it's an experiment geared to making our world, our country, our state, our region a better place, and our society, as we know it, a better place to be part of. And I think we're making some progress. Progress is slow, it's incremental. And it truly is what we're doing at Stubblefield. It's an experiment. It's almost as if we are working in a lab, testing out various ideas, various strategies, various methods. We don't know all the answers. That's why we have these conversations like tonight. That's why Stubblefield has Community Conversation Series. That's why we have the American Conversation Series. That's why Mary has her lecture series. That's why CATF brings together in the summer, convening people here around tough ideas and putting them on the stage, because we learn from those things. A lot has been accomplished at Stubblefield in 5 years. We just had our 5-year anniversary. Happy birthday. But we've got a lot more to do if we expect to have a lasting impact. When Mary and Cindy invited me in May to be part of the President's Fall Lecture Series, there were 3 dates to pick from. 2 of the dates were prior to the November 5th elections. The other date was tonight, 13 days after November 5th. I chose November 18th as my lecture date, knowing that there'd be much to talk about. Now, when I made that decision back in May, I didn't think there'd be quite this much to talk about, but here we are, and we have tons of material to review. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. What I want to accomplish this evening, I want to give you a good overview of where civility fits in our world today. And I want to walk you through some of the drivers that are actually working against civil discourse taking hold. And there are a lot of drivers out there, and some of those drivers are the same drivers that we saw coming to a head in the Trump-Harris battle for the presidency. These drivers include a sense of insecurity that has captured our nation. And that insecurity is tied to economics, it's tied to fear in general, and it's tied to violence. Another key driver is social media, and we'll talk some about that tonight too. Because social media, I don't know how many of you are on social media, but if you are, chances are you're being held hostage by it, more often than not. And I know I'm guilty of it. I think many of us are. And it has an impact. And I'm going to talk a little bit more as we go on about that. Another driver of what is impacting all this is the failure of our institutions. And when I say the failure of our institutions, I'm really talking about probably every institution that we are all somewhat tied into, whether it's the church, it could be higher education, it could be healthcare. It's all of these things that have bubbled up and have made people feel uncertain about their future. Another key driver is the impact that negative political advertising has on us as a potential voter, as a citizen, as someone who may consider about getting involved in something, getting involved in a good cause. Another driver is the unchecked spending that is going on in these political campaigns. And it's not just the presidential campaigns. It's your governor's campaigns, not just here in West Virginia. I'm talking about gubernatorial campaigns everywhere. It's House and Senate races. Just horrible amounts of money being spent. And since we've had the 2010 Citizens United decision, there's virtually no checking in terms of how that money is spent. And then there was a recent Supreme Court decision earlier this year, which made it easier for third-party groups to actually communicate with the campaigns, because allegedly I say, they were not communicating with the campaigns before. I don't believe that, but anyway. But now the Supreme Court's opened the door and said, oh no, it's okay, you can go ahead and talk to the campaigns. And the other driver that I think is just persistent is this prevailing economic democracy that we live in, where there's a feeling that our government is for sale. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the economic democracy in a few minutes. Let me now move into how civil discourse played in the 2024 presidential race. And I'm sorry to be a messenger of bad news. We're going to come out of this with some good news this evening, but there's a lot of gloomy stuff happening too. But in terms of being a messenger for bad news, based on the 2024 elections, civility scored very badly. And I'm talking primarily about the presidential campaigns, but if we went down and looked, more closely at other statewide and local races around the country, we would find examples of this too. But in grading the 2024 presidential election in terms of civility, President-elect Donald Trump would get an F for civility, and I would give Vice President Harris and President Biden a C for civility. The big question coming out of November 5th that we must ask ourselves, does incivility work with voters? That's what we've really got to dig into that in the coming months to determine how that is working with voters, because there's mixed data out there. And let's look at some of the incivility messages that most of us encountered watching this campaign unfold. Let's first look at inflammatory rhetoric, and I know when Peter Loesch was here a couple weeks ago, he talked about the role rhetoric plays in campaigns and in our world. But in terms of inflammatory rhetoric, at the rally that President Trump did in Leeds, Pennsylvania, on a Saturday afternoon, he suggested that fake news journalists could be shot if someone attempted to target him, and then that drew applause from the audience, playing into his disdain and the disdain of his supporters for the media in the United States. That's not civility. That is not civility. And then take a look at the personal attacks. During his campaign rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, he referred to former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as an evil, sick, crazy bee, ... before stopping himself from completing the profane word. And then he regularly referred to Joe Biden as crazy, crooked, and sleepy. And on more than one occasion, he questioned the color of the vice president's skin. Come on now. And he consistently mispronounced her name. That is not good. And he talks about aiming guns at the face of Liz Cheney and calling her a war hawk. There's much more inflammatory, much cruder and non-civil tactics that he deployed, but you get the picture. And it's not a picture of civility coming from our former president and now president-elect. We can only hope that this tone will change in the coming months, but we will see, and I hope all of us in this room will be judges of what's happening. And we'll be out talking to one another about this. On the Harris, Walz, and Biden front, we also saw episodes of behavior that were not the most civil. Harris and Walz both tried to minimize Trump as weird and unserious, and Harris called Trump a fascist, and that he said he was an existential threat. Biden said similar things. Then with some regularity, the vice president's team had 3 U's that they would regularly use. The 3 U's about Donald Trump: unstable, unchecked, and unhinged. And you saw those play out time after time from the Harris team. All of this exemplifies the erosion of civil discourse in the 2024 elections. And it highlights a shift towards more confrontational and uncivil tactics in political campaigning. And it doesn't build out a good lesson for young people that I see sitting in this room tonight who probably are thinking about, I want to consider a career in politics. I want to consider a career in communications, in journalism. And you're thinking, is this what it's really like? And then just, one of the things I try to do, even as a lifelong Democrat, I try to make sure that I'm offering a balance of what's going on out there. And we can't forget, back in 2016, some of the messages that Hillary Clinton had that were not exactly civil. She described Trump's supporters then as a basket of deplorables. And then she went on to say, she made it worse. Some of those folks, they're irredeemable. But thankfully, they're not American. That's uncalled for behavior. Let me ask everyone in the audience tonight, can we all agree that words and action matter? Yeah. After all, words and action, it's part of the Shepherd Civility Code. Another applause for Shepherd for creating this civility code that its staff, its students, its faculty try to adhere to, and it underscores the need for respect and understanding. We need to see more colleges and universities do this. When we look at what happened in the national election 2 weeks ago, the incivility of Donald Trump and his emissaries didn't seem to matter. He won the popular vote by 3 million. He overwhelmingly won the Electoral College. He made inroads into, and in some cases won, various constituencies that the Trump campaign often eviscerated with nasty, often racist messages. But they still voted for him. Just look at some examples from CNN exit polling. Latino voters and men in particular, Latino men in particular, have been moving towards Trump since 2016. This year, Latino men broke for Trump for the first time. Biden had their support by 23 points in 2020. Trump won them in 2024. Latino women still favored Harris, but by smaller margins than they supported Clinton or Biden. The reason Donald Trump got back into office is his campaign smartly figured out how to go in and make have an incremental impact moving certain constituencies over to their side, enough to come out of this with a 3 million vote win. Trump won many key demographics, and this is pretty scary when you look at these demographics that he won. He won the veterans vote 65 to 34. This is a man who referred to veterans as losers and suckers. What's wrong? He won first-time voters 56 to 43. He won non-Jewish church-affiliated voters 60 to 38. He won the born-again evangelical vote 82 to 17. And just to repeat another demographic, church people who voted for Trump in spite of his vulgarities and non-church-going lifestyle. It didn't matter. They were still attracted to him. While we don't have hard data on how civility played completely in the 2024 race, it's clear that the candidate with more civil messaging ended up losing. I look forward to new research that I think will be coming in the next few months that can give us a better handle on the desire or lack of desire from voters with respect to the role that civility plays in our elections. What is clear from the 2024 exit polls is that in terms of Trump voters, their top concern far and away was the economy at 51%, followed by immigration at 20%, and democracy at 12%. For Harris voters, the democracy issues came in first at 56%, abortion at 21%, and the economy at 13%. That's quite a substantial disconnect, but these are still important numbers that we need to dig deeper into, clearly understand if there are links that one can make between civil discourse and democracy, because it did play high. I mean, even in the Trump side, it came in number 3 versus Harris at number 1. They're still high numbers. And when you look at that democracy number, we're talking 45 to 50 million voters who rank democracy as important. Now, what does democracy mean to people? I think the word democracy got passed around very loosely in this 2024 campaign. Honestly, if I heard it one more time, it's like, you know, do you want to explain what you're talking about? Because it never, do you all feel like it got explained very well to people? No. And I think it was we should have been doing a better job explaining that democracy means civility too. And we need to figure that out. Is there, what we still don't know is the potential connection between civility and democracy. Is there one? If so, how does it line up? So a few more data points, and this is going back to a 2022 study by Georgetown's Institute of Politics and Public Service, and they did look then at civility and public attitudes. At that juncture in 2022, 2 years ago, 43% of voters believed politics in our country had become less civil. And 29% said they thought politics had become more civil. 27% believed it, no change. Also in that poll, 80% of Democrats said future political violence is more likely in our politics, as opposed to just 36% of Republicans who agree. Independents were more evenly split, with 49% saying political violence was more likely. When we talk civil discourse, a key value behind it is respect. And that is underscored in one of the preambles of the Stubblefield Institute. And that preamble says, quote, "When differing viewpoints are respected and considered in ways that avoid labeling, alienation, and silencing, it strengthens our nation's ability to solve problems." So let's look at respect. From the 2022 Georgetown survey, it was a value that voters found was very limiting when it came to politicians and the national media. The top three in terms of where no respect was the highest in 2022, Donald Trump's no respect numbers were at 46%. Nancy Pelosi's was at 45%, followed by Fox News at 41%. In the high 30s of no respect were CNN and Mitch McConnell. Then, following the 2022 midterms, Georgetown went back and did a follow-up after the 2022 general election, and found 77% of voters agree that the increasing amount of violent behavior in our society is an extremely or very serious threat to democracy. And that included 75% of Republicans who said that, and 74% of Democrats. Furthermore, 63% of voters believe that the decreasing amount of respect and civility in our political system is an extremely or very serious threat to democracy. Some other findings. More than 8 in 10 Americans agree about the important value of compromise, respect, and civility. 95% of Americans believe respect for one another is the first step to having a government that works, while 92% agree with the statement, civility is the language of respect. Now, those numbers are 2 years old. We need to go back and see what those numbers look like this time, and we need to get a better understanding of why they didn't connect in terms of whether the candidates were civil or not. Now I want to pivot to how political advertising and fundraising contribute to the lack of civility in the campaigns, because they're real killers. We all witnessed tons and tons of TV spots in the 2024 election cycle, and nearly all of them were nasty, negative, full of vitriol and half-truths about the opposing candidates. I want to show you it's about a 2-minute clip. It's from the NBC affiliate in Phoenix, and they just do a really good job summing up how we observe these ads, what we think of these ads, how we don't like negative ads, but we still are swayed by them. And it takes a look at a couple of races in Arizona, but it also captures kind of a national picture of it. I just thought it would really apply. And it also talks about where civility can go in these dangerous times. Cindy's going to help me with this.
Wait for the election season to be over. Not because I don't enjoy the ritual of U.S. elections, but I won't be sad when this endless barrage of attack ads, some of them the ugliest I've ever seen, comes to an end. And those attack ads could be a symptom of a bigger issue in America right now, the lack or loss of civility when it comes to our political process. Make no mistake about it, we are living in dangerous times. Look at the 2 attempted assassinations on former President Trump. Look at January 6th. Look at some of the moronic comments being made by high-ranking politicians on both sides. Eating dogs and cats? Please. I don't think that would have been a political talking point when Ronald Reagan was running. Whatever happened to civility and statesmanship and concepts like country over party? And have attack ads gone too far? Here's 12 News journalist Will Pitts as we begin the breakdown.
Wrong for Arizona.
Carrie Lake's not conservative. She's nuts.
Pretty much every commercial break,
Border chaos is causing crime.
there's an ad telling you how terrible someone is.
Force you into government-run socialized medicine.
Then join Democrats in sending our taxes to fund illegal migrants.
How common are negative ads? We took the hit so you don't have to and watched a full hour of TV just to count and watch the political ads. Here's what we found. There were 39 total commercials. Of those, 14 were negative, 22 were not about politics, and only 3 were positive ads. By positive, we mean they don't criticize their opponent. So it's not just you. There are a ton of negative ads right now.
Once that first negative ad has been launched, then it sort of becomes an all-out war.
So do negative ads work? Samara Klar is a political science professor at U of A.
It's a really hard question to answer because if you ask people, do you like negative ads? They will say, no, we hate them. Nobody likes negative ads. But obviously there has to be something there because they do keep using them. We know that there are some things that can be pretty effective. And one of those things is, instilling a fear or threat or anxiety in voters.
Where did this come from? Klar says we just got used to the lack of civility in politics.
When you ask people, how do you feel about your own party and how do you feel about the other party, over time, and this has gone on for decades, people increasingly say they really do not like the other party, the party they don't vote for.
But Klar says they don't hate the people who vote that way, just the candidates and the party. So will there ever be any end to this?
Americans really hate political aggression, hostility, and fighting. And to me, one of the best pieces of evidence is the declining percentage of Americans who will identify with a party.
In Arizona, independents are now the second biggest voter registration. But even so, the negative ads keep on coming. William Pitts, 12 News.
So that kind of sums up negative advertising and the fact that people don't like them, but they're still voting around them. We've got a lot to learn. So while we're on advertising, I want to touch a little bit on West Virginia, and I want to address briefly the West Virginia political environment on the topic of civility. West Virginia is a bit of an anomaly, if you hadn't already figured that out, because it's become such a deep red bastion in the past 10 years. Right, John? With this Democratic decline gripping West Virginia, you seldom see campaign battles that are closely contested between a Republican and a Democrat. But on a few occasions, you may observe conflict between Republicans and those who are doing primary election battle against one another. One recent example was your 2024 Republican primary for governor between Pat Morrissey and Chris Miller. And let's face it, you'd be hard-pressed to label either one of them as a moderate or a progressive. But you wouldn't know that if you saw these 2 ads that we're going to show you from the primary, and you probably remember them. The first one is by a third-party group, the Black Bear PAC, that was supporting Morrissey. And that it cast Miller as pro-trans. And the second one is from the Miller campaign showing Morrissey as a lobbyist for the trans community. So let's take a look.
He, him, she, her.
They, them? When Chris Miller was a board member at an in-state university, he looked the other way as pro-transgender events happened on his watch. Drag shows, a transgender homecoming gala, and even, quote, a trans closet that provided items to support sex changes for students. Chris Miller protected they, them, not us. Black Bear PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Be he, him, she, her.
Woke New York hospital sought taxpayer money to fund sex changes for minors. They turned to a $1 million DC lobbyist. His name, Pat Morrissey. His pronoun, money-grubbing liberal. Morrissey made a killing lobbying for the trans agenda, mutilating kids for cash. Then Pat transitioned from lobbyist to politician, masquerading as one of us. But the real Pat Morrissey is a pro-trans liberal. It's Pat, and it's wrong for West Virginia.
So, I mean, it's pretty hard to believe the level of distortion and falsehoods that came
what
through.
Makes great salespeople great?
That came through in those in those TV spots. But it is an example of the kind of misleading and uncivil advertising that's being waged not just in a West Virginia race, but in so many other state and local races. And I would mention there were a couple different legal cases, legal issues that these campaigns were going after each other to kind of contest the advertising. And I don't know where that stands right now, but campaign advertising has a direct impact on civil discourse. And we're talking about a lot of money. Campaign advertising in the 2024 cycle totaled almost $11 billion nationwide. And that money is spent on TV spots, radio spots, text, flyers, direct mail, social media, and it runs from the county commissioner races down to up to the White House. The 2024 number of nearly 11 billion is about $1 billion higher than 4 years ago. And it's broken out. The Democrats spent the most. The Democrats spent $5 billion. The Republicans spent 4.1, and the Independents spent about $1.5 billion. And rest assured that large percentages, as you saw in this NBC piece from Phoenix, was centered on negative spots. Campaign advertising is directly supported by the enormous fundraising cycle that is so attached to the American political scene of the past 15 years, coming out of Citizens United Supreme Court case. How many folks in this room were inundated this past campaign season with text, phone calls, and direct mail asking for contributions? Did you really get tired of them? I know I did. And does anybody think it works? I don't. As part of my lecture tonight, I'm hopeful that we'll find areas of agreement that might, longer term, help create an atmosphere in politics that support civility and civil discourse. To do so, I want to pose these questions. Why is negative advertising so popular when voters say they hate them? Michael Franz, who's a professor at Bowdoin College, and he runs the Wesleyan Media Project, says the research shows that negative political ads typically are no more effective than positive ads, but the consultants and the campaign managers don't always believe the research, and so they push the campaigns to keep running the negative ads. We have to ask ourselves, why is this? This could be a project for the Stubblefield Institute or the political science program here at Shepherd to really dig deep in researching why this phenomenon is happening. The second question I want us to ask ourselves are negative political ads more effective in extremely tight races? Franz says yes, and I think probably if you look at the Trump-Harris race, that's probably played in that race. When the margins are extremely close, almost 50-50, negative ads can generate support from a small slice. Again, it's that incremental numbers that Trump pulled to to beat out Harris and for her to do not as well in most cases as Biden did in 2020, and in some cases not as well as Hillary did in 2016. Negative ads in these races also serve sometimes to get out the vote of the candidate's supporters. So perhaps that is a strategy used by the Trump campaign that succeeded in pulling undecideds from the vice president's campaign. The third question is, are negative political ads an equal opportunity sport used by both parties? Overall, the answer is yes, but it depends on the year and the race. In 2024, this past cycle, Republican ads to the U.S. Senate were more negative than their counterparts because the Republicans' goal was to win back the Senate, and they did. Likewise, in the U.S. House races, Democratic ads were more negative as they aimed to retake the House. Trump's ads were mostly negative, while Harris's ads tended to promote herself more and drew a contrast with the former president, slightly less negative. So with respect to negative advertising, we can all agree that it significantly limits the presence of civil discourse. It's definitely an area for us to tackle in a more deeper way, maybe a pilot project for the Institute. It definitely needs work. So the 2024 elections are behind us, and we're now watching the Biden chapter close in the next 63 days and the new Trump chapter opening. This is an inflection point for all of us. It's an inflection point for the country and the world. Our job, and I hinted at this earlier this evening, we must be observant and monitor closely the tone and the tactics as the new administration takes shape and the various factions within our government get established. We will want to keep a keen eye on the executive branch, as well as the new leadership in Congress, both on the Republican and the Democratic side. Will civil discourse have a place at the table? How will voters and citizens look at this? How will they weigh in on this? We need to be asking these questions, and we need to be very vigilant. I want to take a few moments to reflect on the shift in party orientation by key groups of voters, because that was one of the things we saw as a result coming out of the elections 2 weeks ago. This year we had 45 million registered Democrats, 36 million registered Republicans, and 32 million independent voters. Trend-wise, the independents and the Republican numbers are coming up at a rate higher than Democratic registration. Matt Karp, he's a professor of history at Princeton, last week in Jacobin magazine, talked about how national politics has dramatically been reshaped over the past 10 years. He points to working class voters moving away from the Democratic Party, matched by a flood of professional class voters away from the Republican Party. We saw this play out with the Trump and Harris campaign. Just look at Trump's huge Madison Square Garden rally right before the election, the Puerto Rico Island of Garbage event, and his appeal to the non-college bro crowd, and to Harris playing into the white dudes for Harris crowd, deploying Liz Cheney, and the appeal to younger women through Taylor Swift. Karp concludes that until Democrats can find a way to win back a large chunk of working class voters, whoever picks up the Trump mantle in 2028 will have an edge. So speaking on this Democratic to Republican shift, we've seen this playing out in West Virginia for the past 10 years. The Democratic Party in West Virginia is basically dead on arrival. Sorry, John. And I personally believe that is bad for West Virginia. It's bad for the citizens. It's bad for everyone. If you were in the halls of the state capitol in Charleston, you would have a hard time locating a Democrat. That's not good. 2014 marked a huge transformation of Republican domination in West Virginia. For 80 years, the legislature was majority Democrat. For 2025, the Republicans will control 32 of 34 Senate seats, and in the State House of Delegates, 9 Democratic seats to 91 Republican seats. I don't think this is a healthy situation. In presidential elections in West Virginia, the last Democratic nominee to carry the state was Bill Clinton, and he won both in 92 and 96. Michael Dukakis won in 88, and Jimmy Carter won in 76 and 80. Looking around the country, the Republicans control state legislatures in 26 states, none at the margins they control in West Virginia. 3 states are divided, and Democrats control 17 states. 1 state is nonpartisan, 3 are still undecided with votes still being tabulated. Furthermore, coming out of the elections 2 weeks ago, Republicans now have a trifecta in 23 states where they control the governor's office and both legislative chambers. And we have right now 27 Republican governors and 23 Democratic governors. That didn't change much 2 weeks ago. One-party rule is not healthy. And it's even less healthy in West Virginia, where we need a diversity of ideas and opinions to shape the future of this state. It should not be in the hands of one party. It's a disgrace. A two-party or multiple party system should encourage healthy opposition and a representation of diverse views seen through the lens of civil discourse. And it helps prevent any one party from accumulating too much power. It reduces the risk of corruption, authoritarianism. It reduces the risk of abuse of authority. We've always called it checks and balances. You don't have checks and balances in West Virginia anymore. Your only checks and balances you have is when you go to the polls to vote, and most chances are there are not even Democrats on the ticket. That is not a good system. Further, one-party rule can cause stagnation and non-responsiveness to the needs and concerns of the electorate. Having at least 2 strong parties in any political system creates a balance that not only enhances representation, but also supports a resilient and adaptable democratic society. And if done effectively, we present citizens with examples of civility. And I raise this about the West Virginia example because I know I shouldn't be judging the people in the room tonight, but my guess is there's quite a bit of concern about what lies ahead in our federal government and in our new administration. So I think we need to be concerned that in some ways that we have a more balanced political makeup on the federal side as we go forward in the weeks and months and years ahead, and not lose to one party and have one party dominate as we've seen here in West Virginia. And hopefully I think there are some things slowly taking shape in West Virginia by some other organizations who are trying to really think this through. We must continually ask ourselves what we are doing to get more people engaged in the political process. Voting, talking to their elected officials, attending town meetings, going to a Stubblefield forum. Not every community in our country has the resources you have here. We need to rebuild trust in our institutions, in government, and we need to limit the role that money plays in politics. I talked about that earlier. And this is a tall order after the Citizens United decision. Let's look at the proliferation of media sources and how that's changed in the last 25 to 30 years, from cable news to social media, because all of that impacted how things came out 2 weeks ago. This proliferation of media sources has led to both increased access to information, not always accurate information, and it's been an environment where misinformation spreads really rapidly. Many media outlets present highly partisan viewpoints. They reinforce echo chambers, and they deepen the distrust in opposing perspectives. We don't need that. We see this play out daily on Fox, on CNN, on MSNBC, News Nation, Newsmax. They're all in this. They're all guilty, and it leaves a feeling of helplessness among voters. It does it to me. I mean, if I'm in the car driving, I switch back and forth between those 3 networks, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, and it just eats on my nerves. I mean, it's spooky. So we need to maybe ease up on some of our viewership there. Now, CNN came on the scene in 1980, and when they did, they were a pretty factual, give me the facts, ma'am, and news service. But that has changed quite a bit. And at that same time in the 80s, some of this stuff didn't just happen. We saw the proliferation of right-wing radio. That started back in the 80s as well. And then everything else began to unfold, social media. I'm going to touch on something else, another about the media. Another critical aspect of today's media world is the fact that 1 in every 5 Americans live in a media desert. A media desert is defined by communities where residents have limited or no access to reliable local news and information. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but large swaths of West Virginia are considered a media desert. Further, a media desert is one where there's a dependence on regional and national news, and basically these outlets overlook local concerns. Another defining characteristic of a media desert is around community impact, and where we see an absence of robust local journalism that in turn means less government accountability, decreased civic engagement, and a weakened social cohesive network. Where I live in upstate New York, tens of thousands of citizens are living in a media desert, or a quasi-media desert, where there's no significant focus on coverage by a daily newspaper, no local radio, TV. An example, I live 120 miles from New York City and 45 miles from Albany. Neither Albany nor New York cover anything in the communities that I live in. We have a daily paper. I'm looking at Susan Mills back there because she knows the area. We have a daily paper in Kingston, which is a half hour away, and they might have 1 or 2 stories a week on these towns, but there's next to no coverage. And what that does, it decreases people's interest in what's going on, and it probably has an impact on people's voter habits. They're not supporting school issues. They're not supporting the community. It means that local government and elected officials are operating without much scrutiny, and important issues like the environment, healthcare, schools, transportation, they're not covered in depth. They're not getting the coverage. We see, back to West Virginia, we see a similar, Harriet's done a good job with the paper here, but we see a similar situation happening here in the Eastern Panhandle, where your daily newspaper is part of one of the 10 largest corporate chains, news chains in the country, and they're focused more on consolidation and downsizing. There's very little coverage of important news. There's no investigative reporting, and I'm not saying there's corruption in your local government, but they're not being there's no watchdogs. There's no media watchdogs. This does not bode well for our political system and our democratic style of government. Since 2005, more than 2,500 daily and weekly newspapers have folded. I am proud of this. When I was editor of the Daily Athenaeum, which is the daily newspaper at West Virginia University, we adopted a motto in the mid-1970s, and they continue to use it today. The motto is, "Little good is accomplished without controversy, and no civic evil is overcome without publicity." That's exactly what it's all about. And that all equates to civility and civil discourse. On another level, many citizens feel that the current governing model, what I would call an economic democracy, is not working for them. Why is it an economic democracy? Because in too many cases, there is a sense that government is for sale, along with questionable campaign fundraising, shady lobbying tactics, too cozy corporate and labor connections, an absence of ethics, AKA our current United States Supreme Court, members of Congress, revolving doors between high-level government positions to regulated industries like pharma and defense. And let's not forget gerrymandering and the unwieldy and antiquated electoral college that favors small states at the expense of larger population centers. West Virginia is a small state. West Virginia should not have the same say as California or New York. We're all voters. You know, what happened to the one vote rule? When all is said and done, this creates a sense that the views and needs of many are not represented. This can lead to the belief that their vote or voice doesn't truly count. And then what happens? They don't want to get involved. The sense that the political system is rigged or inherently unfair definitely has a dampening effect on engagement and participation. Some of this is evident in West Virginia, where voter turnout is among the lowest in the nation. In 2024, West Virginia had the 4th lowest turnout of eligible voters in the nation. We okay? All right. The voter turnout was 54%. Gary Zuckett heads the West Virginia Citizen Action Group, and he attributes these low numbers to a loss of faith in the political system. The widening gap between rich and poor has left many feeling as though the economic system, and by extension the political system, favors the wealthy and the elite. Issues such as stagnant wages, high health care costs, lack of affordable housing, it leaves citizens feeling that politicians are disconnected from them, from the day-to-day challenges faced by ordinary people. In combination, these factors can make it difficult for people to feel invested in the political process. And for many, tuning out is a way to cope with the perceived dysfunction, and rebuilding trust in the system. And to rebuild trust in the system will require addressing several of these underlying issues in a more meaningful way. Many of us, most of us, are worried and frustrated and stressed about what the future holds. I know that's why you came here tonight. Complacency is not an option. Sitting it out is not an option. We must all opt in, and I mean all of us, whether you voted for Harris or you voted for Trump or you picked someone else. We all must come together, and we got to work on a path forward. Some of that is already happening on this campus, and it's off to a good start, but there's a lot more to do. Let me close. I want to map out a few steps in what could be a path forward starting tomorrow. First, we need to have open-ended, honest discussions with both friends and foe. Bill and I are regularly arguing with each other, but he's usually wrong. No, we agree on most things. But we need to ensure a moral and a social commitment that includes fair and accurate critiques of what's going on, fair and accurate critiques of the new administration coming in, as well as Congress, down to the state level. Whether it's Donald Trump in office or someone else later, we must, as former Obama National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes wrote, and I agree with him completely, we've got to reform the corruption endemic to American capitalism, corporate malfeasance, profiteering in politics, unregulated technologies that are transforming our lives in some very negative ways. One role, and I will say this, and we were talking about this earlier today, Bill and I were, there could be some things bubbling up from this Trump election that might actually tackle some of this. We'll see. The jury's out. We'll see. But there's always an opening there. One way for the Stubblefield Institute and its peers to play is to help build a new agenda for America, for our state and our region. This includes listening to communities that don't believe they're being heard, and Stubblefield's doing a lot of that, but you got to do more. Engaging leaders on the local level, fostering a sense of belonging so that we're more than one party rule. We need to encourage more young people to think about careers in politics. We need these people. And more than anything, we need to find common ground. We really need to find common ground. At Shepherd and its peers, we need to ensure that our academic programs are primed and running at high speed so that we can continue to build out best-in-class instruction in political science, health sciences, the arts, business, media, and communications. And there's a role for civil discourse in all of those fields. It carries over into everything we do, whether it's going to the gas station or the hardware store or the hospital, people that are working in these professions. Higher ed too often moves too slowly and is not seen as future-focused and serving the public. This is no time for that. We need to make sure that civil discourse is integrated into all things academic. And speaking of education, this is another, just sticking point for me. We need to bring back civics education to our K-12 schools. Hello, my God. There's no civics being taught. I mean, I don't know for sure, but there's virtually no civics being taught in any of our public schools anymore. I mean, when I was in school, we had at least a year or two of civics, democracy, all of that. This has been absent for way too long. We need to keep reminding ourselves that listening is critical, along with storytelling. And in the vein of storytelling, I want to give you an example because I think this is something that we could all walk out of here tonight and get involved with. Many of us are familiar with StoryCorps, which was created by an NPR program created about 20 years ago. Now StoryCorps this fall has launched a new program called One Small Step. And it's really interesting. They have a website set up. I encourage you to check it, One Small Step. What they do, they match, people sign up, they match a person who signs up with a partner who's on one side of the political aisle. They match this person up with a person on the other side of the political aisle, and they set up a video call for them to talk, and it's recorded much the way StoryCorps is, and it makes it interesting and understandable. I can envision One Small Step programs getting started in lots of places, including right here in Shepherdstown. We've got to keep reminding ourselves that civil discourse is synonymous with democracy, anti-authoritarianism, checks and balances in governing, and working for the common good. Another part of the path forward is to work from a playbook that is fact-based, to be more mindful of misinformation and disinformation that is propagated and likely fills up your inbox and your social media channels. My Episcopal priest, in her sermon last Sunday, and I'm going to read you a few quotes because it really resonates with us tonight. She said, "The media, amplified by algorithms, has long known that 4 topics can be counted on to get and hold people's attention: fear, rage, hate, and greed. Print media," she said, "traded on this human propensity, and now social media does it with one huge difference: algorithms. With their computing power, algorithms know how to keep us on a site, and they do it relentlessly by piling on more stories guaranteed to hold our attention and corrupt our souls." She goes on to mention that the poet, theologian William Blake, who says, "We become what we behold." And my priest Susan says, "We cannot fill our minds with stories that arouse fear and hate and rage and greed without those emotions taking root in our own hearts. We start to lose trust in people around us. And as for what is true, we become skeptical. What is the truth? What is the lie? How can I know?" And there's some new Pew data that I saw this afternoon before I came over here that I thought was interesting. And it's kind of related. And if you're a young person, you are more likely to be swayed. No, I shouldn't say this, swayed. You're more likely to know about influencers who are trying to get your attention. And so Pew did a study that just came out today that looked at social media influencers and their politics, and I was surprised with the outcome. They took Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, and YouTube. 30% of the influencers were right-leaning, and 22% were left-leaning, and I guess the rest are somewhere else. Men, this is another place for women to really get more connected and involved. Men outnumbered women on social media influencing 2 to 1. So as I mentioned earlier, democracy was the #1 concern of Harris voters, #3 concern of Trump voters. So there's clearly something about democracy that both groups care about. The New York Times Siena poll from last month, nearly 1/2 said that American democracy does not do a good job of representing the people, and we've seen a greater questioning of how democracies are working globally. A Pew poll from June of citizens from 12 highly developed countries found that 64% were dissatisfied with how democracy is working in their country. US and Japan was higher at 69%, Canada and Germany the lowest at 48 and 45%. So in terms of tackling the democracy angle, this is something we must do in the path forward. Part of what we saw from the results 2 weeks ago are that many voters feel they're not being heard. And it resonated around concerns voters have with respect to how the economy is working for them on immigration and to some extent around America's role in the world order. The editorial board of the New York Times, in response to the election outcome, said it best, and it's a perfect conclusion for what I'm going to say tonight. Ben Franklin famously admonished the American people that the nation was a republic, aka democracy, if you can keep it. A lot is at stake in the United States in the weeks ahead. How will President Trump govern? Who are the winners and losers? How will America change? What will happen with the many hotspots around the world? We must constantly remind ourselves that it's up to us to determine the long-term fate of American democracy. The outcome is in the hands of the American people. That's the work ahead, and it must be centered around respect, trust, civility, and love. Yes, love. Thank you. It's time to get started. So,
Thank you, Scott. Yes. Does anyone have a question for Scott? I think we can take one or two.
Hi. Do I need to introduce myself, or?
Yeah, that'd be good. People should introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm Al Draper. I moved here in 1984, and it was a one-party state.
It used to, I know it was the other way around.
Yeah, but when it was a Democratic state, had been for some time, were you as upset about it being a one-party state then as you seem to be now?
Probably not, but
Why?
but
Why?
Because we're at a different place and we're at a different juncture today. We're at things are more. We know more about what's going on in the world today. We know more about what leadership is, and I think we've already seen the last 20 years.
Well, we're talking about West Virginia.
I know. I'm talking about West Virginia too. Do you think it's healthy to have one party running everything?
Well, I know when it was the Democrats, they almost destroyed medicine in the state of West Virginia. I moved here to practice medicine, and
that was. I mean, I agree with you. That wouldn't. I don't think it's healthy either.
Democrats just about destroyed medicine in this state, and we're still not back to where we should be as a result of it being a one-party Democratic state.
Well, and to your point, when I was Governor Rockefeller's press secretary, we had similar, the margins that are happening today, we had similar margins, as you're pointing out, on the Democratic side. It's not healthy. You've got to open things up more. So I hope that people will step up and not be afraid to run for office.
Do you think if the Democrats ran for things other than what they are running for, they might do better?
Well, I don't. What should they be running for?
Well, things that make sense.
Okay. Well, tell us what.
We obviously disagree, but I am nonpartisan. But
we should have more.
I spent my whole adult life doing things where things didn't go according to your opinion or how your emotions. It was based on science, and if things did not go well, you hurt people, you killed people, and you had to deal with fact rather than your emotions or your opinions or what your parents told you to do.
I'm in total agreement with that.
I think the Democrats need to think about that more, because I have not seen a lot of evidence of that in this state or for the last 4 years in this nation. And I think the majority of the American people would agree with me.
Well,
and let me one more thing.
Okay.
They talk about uneducated people. Well, a lot of these people have been through high school, they've been through vocational training, they've had training in the military, and these uneducated people are the people that grow your food, they build your houses, and they defend your nation.
That's right.
In the military.
That's right. Yeah.
And so for the Democrats to talk badly about these uneducated people, what? Okay, well, here.
Thank you. John.
Scott, I'd like to throw an idea out to you and have you react to it.
Okay.
And it has to do with the question of limits on campaign financing.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Citizens United. And I've always thought that the decision in Citizens United logically followed a case much earlier, in 1976, Buckley versus Vallejo, when the court said, quote, money is speech.
Yeah.
This makes it really difficult to limit it. But I do think that gives us an opening. Speech is, by its very nature, a public act.
Yes.
I think we can pass rules that require every single dollar that finds its way into a campaign be identified from where it originated.
Yes.
Without violating either Buckley or Citizens United.
Yes. Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Back in the back.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening.
I am, other than Mr. Doyle, I'm probably the longest lived resident here in Jefferson County. John has me by several years. So he will remember the placards that was over a classroom when we were in school. The placards read, "Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people." Now, I don't have to go any further to say what 2024 was. That being said, with that in mind, and also a disclaimer, I think I'm the only public official, elected public official here tonight.
Okay.
The difficulty we have now is no matter what our idea is being heard. And I'd like for you to, if you wouldn't mind elaborating, how can those of us who are not over-moneyed manage to be heard in this environment?
Well, I think you need to, and you probably are already doing this, but I think we need to get the folks that you're talking about. We need to get people more involved in community affairs. Yeah, we need to get them more connected into what's happening in their communities. They need to speak out. You need to make sure that you've got to really galvanize, do whatever you possibly can to galvanize the local media to do some coverage of what's happening. Take your message into the schools. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't need to be political. It needs to be about good government, and start with young people. I think that's how we can turn things around. All right. Well, you got to do. Okay, that's good.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you again to Scott. Let's give him another round of applause.